Sometimes we must rise to the challenge and contemplate our own behaviours and expectations. We must consider things such as, how can I improve myself? Am I doing enough for the people around me? How many times can I order food in a week before it becomes frowned upon? And also, are Gorillaz better than Blur? But first, we need to retrace some steps to understand why this is even a question. Blur were a band that were formed in London in 1988, and they became a key part of the 90s Britpop scene. Throughout the band's tenure, they were most notable for constantly challenging Oasis for chart number ones. And they provided one of the most competitive band rivalries in the UK for the past 30 years. A rivalry that they admittedly lost in the end, due to the genius of Noel and Liam Gallagher. I think so anyway. Whereas Gorillaz were originally formed in 1998 and considered to be a virtual band. This was due to the band consisting of fictional members, which were depicted through comic-style artwork which has been released over the past 20 to 25 years. And their debut album came out in 2001. It was driven mainly by the song Clint Eastwood, with their future success skyrocketed by the album Demon Days in 2005. But then we come back to ask, why does comparing anything either of these bands have done even matter? Well, it's because the jewel in the crown of both successful projects has mainly been led by the extremely talented and handsome, both projects being led by the extremely talented Damon Albarn. As a result, it's natural for people to compare the two bodies of work that Damon has been involved in. And we see it throughout music. For example, people often compare Noel Gallagher and Liam Gallagher's solo work and Oasis, Paul McCartney in the Beatles and Wings, Alex Turner in Arctic Monkeys and the Last Shadow Puppets. And of course, who could forget Dave Grohl in Nirvana, or Dave Grohl in Foo Fighters, or Dave Grohl in Queens of the Stone Age, or Dave Grohl in Them Crooked Vultures, or Dave Grohl in his many appearances, collaborations and contributions towards the work of Tenacious D. And whilst the list of things Dave Grohl has been in continues, there's a bit more of an issue when comparing Gorillaz and Blur. With the previous examples just listed, they've made music in relatively similar areas, or produced songs that aren't a million miles away from one another. For example, I feel most people would say the music produced by Oasis is better than the Gallagher's solo work. Even though the solo work is still good, it's just easy to compare the two as they're quite similar, and then make a decision from there. But the issue between Blur and Gorillaz isn't just that they don't produce music in a similar genre, it's that no one has any idea how to categorize Gorillaz into any genre at all. I mean, you tell me, is it indie? Is it R&B? Is it hip-hop? Is it something that could be described like apocalypse pop? Probably all of the above at the exact same time. It's just that confusing. I think Gorillaz as a genre is just kind of undefinable. Not only is it due to the futuristic style of music that they regularly angle their production on, but it's also because the project largely focuses on collaboration. This naturally means that Gorillaz' sound varies a lot, but somehow they still manage to produce a bass sound that on each record means you can tell it is a Gorillaz track, but somehow there's still no specific genre for which they lie in. And on some level, this is where you could say Blur has the upper hand. Blur has a solid identity of one of the main faces of the Britpop scene, and it contributed to the new wave of music that was taking over. Alongside having a clear attitude to how they wanted themselves to be portrayed in the public eye, their music had a very clear attitude also. They were the southern antidote to the northern rebelling that was happening as a result of Oasis, so as well as being incredibly influential, they can also be categorized into a genre, which isn't always a bad thing. It means that your music can follow better structures and patterns, become more relatable, more playable, reach a wider audience. It can be evaluated easier, critiqued better, and overall become more sellable and successful. But equally, you could say that a lack of genre or boundaries is what allows Gorillaz as a music project to be so ambitious. And you certainly can't deny the epic range of music that the band has produced. For example, you have Snoop Dogg on the opening track of the Plastic Beach album, but then on later albums you've got a completely different angle, where there's a collaboration with the band Slaves and Slow Tie on Momentary Bliss, which feels like a joining of two separate generations between Damon and the aforementioned artist. And then even more recently, you have the collaboration with Tame Impala, which sounds like you're flying down a futuristic imaginary highway. And on top of all of that, any song from Demon Days highlights the best of the best to me, with some of their most well-known tunes featuring on the album, such as Dirty Harry, Dare, and of course Feel Good. And whilst Blur's songs might be more iconic or well-known, Gorillaz certainly have a very large following themselves. They're definitely popular, and you could even argue one or two of their songs stand up to Blur's in a commercial aspect. I mean, it's hard to find a person who hasn't heard Feel Good, so just which is better? Well, you could say Blur due to the social impact and musical impact they had in the Britpop scene, and how they'll always be drawn into the Blur versus Oasis debate. And you could argue that the band has more big hitters, with songs such as Park Life, Girls and Boys, and of course Song 2. But then you could argue for Gorillaz, due to the musical development of their work, alongside the enormous scope and range of their discography. It reflects that both new newcomers and legends are welcome to contribute towards a project, and it does all of this whilst pushing the boundaries of music. Alongside this, Gorillaz is still an ongoing project, whereas Blur, despite some recent revivals and live shows, is noted to be a bit more of a retired legend now. So we don't know how the Gorillaz story is going to end, or if it ever will end due to constantly involving new artists. But to be honest, commercial success or pushing boundaries doesn't just win you an argument. It's almost impossible to decide which is better due to them being so different. I mean, you could summarise the two projects in a snapshot. Blur is a pinpoint in time, a cultural movement, a key counterpart of Britpop, and a staple of British music, where recklessness and good tunes were met by the pretty boys that represented a new generation, unveiling itself throughout the 90s and early 2000s, whereas Gorillaz could be thought of as a constantly shifting and ever-changing party that invites both newcomers and hardened veterans along for the ride. Each individual helps to contribute towards the ever-changing and ever-developing ethos of the band to create something new, an alien life form that even music struggles to wrap the existing framework and boundaries around. And as a result of both projects being so different, your decision on which is better is just coming down to preference, and that's where you're going to have to sit on it. Personally, I prefer Gorillaz, even though I really like Blur, but I certainly don't think Gorillaz are better than Blur, nor do I think Blur are better than Gorillaz. My overall opinion just is that Damon Albarn is one extremely talented, ambitious and handsome Damon Albarn is just one extremely talented and ambitious man, and he's very successful in what he does. But overall, what do you think? Do you have a preference? Do you think one's just better than the other? Let me know. But on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.